Happy Friday night. Happy cocktail night. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. Cheers, my dears. It's Friday night, and it is Esther Knipe night. This has been a long time coming. Why didn't I cover Esther a long time ago? This has been a crazy rabbit hole of a day, but we are here now, and tonight is the night. Let me fix my, my screen here. As you can see, I'm at my mom's house. This is a me and my sister Jessica weekend. We're staying at my mom's, and the kids managed to come along because they haven't seen her for a while. But it should be a fun weekend for me. I'm taking the day off tomorrow to go antiquing, and I haven't had a day off in so long that it's just crazy. I didn't even take Christmas off. So this is going to be a good time for me tomorrow. And I spent much of today prepping the content for tonight because there's so much. I'm afraid I'm going to go racing through it. Don't let me. I can always put the brakes on and we can always cover it later. But I'm currently appropriately enough, hiding in the kids' playroom, which is like a very wooden room, very sort of woodsy room off of the house. And hopefully not too bad of an echo, but the perfect place to roost for a while we talk about Esther Knipe. Cheers, my dears. Robin, it's great to see you. Happy cocktail night. Linda, happy cocktail night. Cheers, my dears. Teresa, great to see you. Happy cocktail night. I sent your rug out. I don't think I sent the tracking. I just did it a couple days ago. I am so sorry I'm late with sending some things from the sales. Combo of craziness, but also all of the sickness coming and going really threw me off with errands. Penny, great to see you. Kaz, great to see you. Happy Friday, everyone. Chrissy, great to see you. Happy cocktail time. And Karen, happy cocktail time. Becky, cheers. And Janice, happy cocktail night. It -6 in Minnesota. Brrr, that is really cold. It's cold here too. It's today was the day. I didn't know if I'd make it tonight at all because our forecast was freezing rain. It's a good one, isn't it? Freezing rain, because it's like, well, what does that mean exactly? It's so strange. It seems impossible. So I drove up earlier than I thought I would so that I missed that window of freezing rain. I went before the temperature was freezing. But what a crazy forecast. It sounds like you're definitely going to die, doesn't it? Like no matter where you are or what you're doing, you're probably not going to make it. But I made it. So it's been a wild weather day here. Linda, happy cocktail time. Kirsten, between 12 and 15 there, freezing. Aileen, good to see you. Happy cocktail time. And Susie, all the buddies are on. Linda, thank you. Thumbs up for Ribbon Candy Hooking. Thank you so much. We'll keep comments and thumbs up, anything you can do to keep the channel visible. I really appreciate. Cindy, happy. Oh, your 62nd birthday today. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Cheers, my dears. Happy 62nd. That is a good number, huh? I know you're going to get a wave of wishes, as you should, on your birthday. I'm happy to spend it with you, too. This is such a treat. Crafter's Grimoire Sanctuary, hello. Good to see you. Bray York, good chilly evening. It is. It is a proper winter evening, isn't it? Christine, I haven't seen you for a while. Happy Friday. Good to see you. Denise, hello in Texas. Dave, homemade pizza and beer. Oh, you are always doing something civilized. I love it. There we go with our happy birthdays. All right, I'm going to start commentary right. Thank you, Jennifer. Happy Friday, Jennifer. I'm going to start commentary and stuff right away because it's just so much tonight. But I wanted to mention, I'm not going to talk about things because you know I have a bunch. Oh, well, you know what I do have to tell you about before I forget is last night was the night that the Alice Butler patterns started to appear on ribboncandyhooking.com. So if you've been waiting for those, they're going piecemeal, right? I've got a lot of shenanigans to do to get each one ready, but they are popping up like weeds. Remember Alice loved her garden on Ribbon Candy Hooking, and quite a few patterns have sold already, all offered in 2 sizes for hooking and punching on 3 different backing choices. But as I said, it won't be long. As soon as I can come up for air just a little more, I would say within the month, I will offer all of the patterns as also latch hook possibilities and miniature Russian punch in case you want to do them quite small to have as like a placeholder, you know. Caroline, good to see you. So along those, Barbara, good to see you. Happy Friday night. You know I've been working on miniature punch. This isn't a project I'm working on for the book. I'm taking a departure from everything for like 24 hours. It's just amazing, crazy, and irresponsible, isn't it? But I'm caught up with the chapter for the book that's due coming up. That's the stabby chapter, like the punch, the needle felting, and the miniature punch. And I started working on a different miniature punch project from my catalog of things I wanted to get through, some of my own designs, some inspired by Seuss designs. So I busted out this one here. The colors are going to be awful here in the playroom, but the Dr. Seuss type hill and it's a crazy tree with the fuzzy fruits. And then I'm going to put two much more traditional sheep, like, big fat country sheep, black, white faces, vice versa. But that is all happening. But what I discovered that was a departure from what I told you yesterday or the day before, because I mentioned how much fun I'm having with my tool, the Pretty Punch. And it is remarkably pretty, fun, easy to use, and very hard to make any kind of mistake. You dial your number, you dial it this way, and the thing comes in or out, and your spool sits up here. But you know what I discovered today? You must have these kinds of spools, right, to fit on this, and they're not super scarce, but they're finite, and there's limited colors of the new ones that are being manufactured. But what I found out the hard way after I packed to come to my mom's and do this little sneaky project, I thought, oh, I can finally blaze on something I really like. I'm going to bring all my colors. And I didn't realize that the spools, although they look quite similar, they aren't. You see what I mean? So the ones that were for the Ultra Punch, like in case you're getting into this too, ever since I shot my mouth off about it, these aren't quite so comfortable on the Pretty Punch with this tool. The Pretty Punch in general, yes, but having other kinds of spools other than the Pretty Punch Shoppettes, Shoppettes, other than their own brand on this gadget, troubling, difficult, tricky, and snaggy. So just so you know that, you can use these for all kinds of other punch. But if you want to have this gadget with the thing resting on top, it really is a job for the Shoppettes, and everything else does seem to want to snag. That was a discovery that I made today, but you probably won't. Well, you can see a little bit. It's just amazing. It's like such a nice little fluffy surface underneath that it makes with, as little attention as I pay to what I'm often doing. There's like no mistakes. Like there's nothing coming up. There's no snagging. There's no pulling. It is very, very, very clean, easy. I would dare say foolproof. So very fun craft, something interesting to get into. Courtney, good to see you. Quick question that's off topic. Perfect. How do I redeem my bingo winnings to apply to an order? So you should have gotten an email, Courtney, with a code. So it sounds like you didn't. So I'll have to resend. We had a question the other day when I ran the Mid-Century Modern class, which was fantastic. I loved it, and it was a really exciting, inspiring, and productive class. And the other one coming up, the final one coming up on Sunday, if you're interested, the Mid-Century Modern class, Designing Like. It was an epic class. It went right to the minute. First time I've timed things really well. Tons of interesting games, very nostalgic, very inspiring, I think, for everybody. It was really successful. But during that class, the question came up about emails. So always check your emails, and Courtney, I'll send it to you anyway. But always check your emails when you're expecting something from me, like notification about a class or a Zoom or a login or a bingo code. Because sometimes people have more, first thing, the most common thing, sometimes people have more than one email and sometimes do some shopping at work from a work email and then look on your personal email at home. I'm not saying that's you, Courtney, or anybody in particular, but this is the number one reason things can't be found is because something is bought on one email and we have a different email in the system for you, like your official one. So sometimes it's that, and sometimes, of course, it's check the trash. Because whenever anything bounces back, of course, I immediately respond to that by resending or getting in touch. So it means it would go somewhere, but we don't always know where, and it might be like a dumpster fire by now, like if it went into the trash. So I'll resend, but that does happen. Let me catch up with, oh, I think I missed some. I got to check the comments. I got to check. Oh no, is somebody sick? Let's see. Oh no, Caroline is in the hospital tonight. I had to be with the Rug Cooking family. Caroline, is everything okay? Let me see if I can find out more. I'm very sorry to hear that, but I'm very happy that you're there, right? Be with your friends, especially when things are not going perfectly. Hello. Oh, Lois, good to see you. You're in Victoria, British Columbia. What a beautiful area. I'm so happy that you're there. Oh, I hope you feel better too, Caroline. I hope you feel better. Let us know if we can do like anything, really. If you want me to send anything to boost your spirits, I would be more than happy to do that. That would be a pleasure. Um, oh, Christine says, I got one of those pretty punches for Christmas one year, years ago. Super fun, super easy to use. I'm telling you, it is a new world when you get into doing this punch thing. But that spool thing really tripped me up today, and I thought it was worth mentioning because I'm all for the spools, and I will continue to pig out on the spools. But I just have to be mindful and careful about bringing all of my punches because of that problem with the sort of diameter of the center of the bobbin. Unexpected. I like the, oh, Jennifer says, I like the pretty punch too. So nice to have the thread attached. It is nice to have the thread attached because you know the game when you don't have the, when it's not sitting up there, the chance of it getting twisted somewhere and pulling a little bit and not making loops is 100%. So, I mean, it's not impossible to hoop without this, to loop without this gadget, but it's quite fun. And these are still on eBay. This should cost about $20 on eBay. So if because of this video, which sometimes happens, they sell out and people start getting grand ideas about what they're worth, just remember, this is a pretty punch. And just give it a hot minute if people are putting prices crazy, because this is worth about $20, right? And the chapettes should be about $1 to $2 each. They're 200 yards each, which is a remarkable amount of yardage for this craft. Because even this is quite a large piece as it goes, right? This is probably, I think this is 8.5. Or this is 8.5. So quite, this is quite big for this. But I was doing this for literally an hour, and I screwed up most of it because I had the wrong spools on, and I still made great traction. So it's just amazing. You can get a nice finished textile piece using colors that you love, having more ability to blend with the Russian punch, miniature punch, than the traditional punch, in my opinion. Just the smaller, finer loops, you can get one here and there and blend amazingly. Glints and slivers of light. Oh, I hear the kids going wild up there. It's a lot of fun. Highly recommend. A lot of fun. Very neat, very clean. Really, really huge thumbs up in my opinion. I love this product, and I'm thinking about ways that I can use it more in ribbon candy hooking. Yeah, I'm worried about Caroline. Let's see if we can see anything else. Crafter's Grimoire. Oh, that reminds me. I have 2 unscratched bingo tickets. Good for you. I love those things they sell to scratch cards, right? You sometimes see them in gift stores and stuff. It's like a fancy coin attached to something blingy that you can attach to your keychain or whatever. I got those for the kids for the stocking. Santa got them. I guess I shouldn't be encouraging them to play gambling games anyway, but that's the kind of folk we are. Caroline, thanks so much. Okay. Yeah, Caroline, you have to keep us updated. Now we're going to be like a knot in my stomach. Christine, when I do the mini punch with the Ultra, when I have resistance, the thread is always in the cat's teeth. There you go, right? That's a total LOL. That's so true. Any little pull on it and you go, why are the loops not staying 0 to 100? And then 99% of the time it's snagging on something. Occasionally you get that weird thing where it's just stuck in between threads and you just don't know why it won't just do it, right? And you have to figure out, with this it's easy because the weave is so tight. You have to figure out how to get into the little hole right near it, right? To give it support. Because with this, I'm going to say it, it's almost impossible to bump your loops up and have them come up the back because the weave is so fine. To get the needle into the same hole twice, right? It's like, it seems like Murphy's Law would make it a guarantee, but it's almost impossible. I mean, it just never happens. Out of this whole piece, right, when I finish this, I'll probably have 1 loop standing up because I accidentally pushed it. It's that hard to do it. Whereas with traditional sized punch needle, that is one of my biggest problems, is punching loops out on the other side. But I'm sure I'm not as good as you at it either. Much more of a rug hooker. Christine, sounds like a common problem. Absolutely. So tonight I want to talk about Esther Knipe. This is such an amazing story, and I have a share screen presentation for you. I did all of my work and all of my study research today from this unbelievable book that you have to look for, because this is not an expensive book. I got it used on eBay or one of those. Rug Hooking Traditions, right? Rug Hooking Traditions with Patty Yoder, who we've covered and we will cover again. This is a split book, split in half, 2 different artists, and Esther Knipe. So Rug Hooking Traditions, they have done 3 books. This one Magdalena Biner Eby, and the Hutchinsons, James and Mercedes. Those 3 books, all 3 of them grand slams. There is a child entering. Don't trip on the cord. Shut the door. Shut the door. Edgy. Mama is edgy. Here, watch the cord. Watch the wine. Okay. You can say a quick hello. There's Jossie. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the little match girl from Hans Christian Andersen. I thought it was Jossie. What happened to your hair?
I did a somersault.
You did a somersault. Okay, good. Well, that explains it, right?
I made a chocolate umbrella.
Okay. Yeah, as you should. As you should, Friday night baby. And you've got your shirt both inside out and backwards. That's something
I did
special.
it on purpose.
Okay. Well, then you just canceled out all the good luck you might have had. Because the chance of you doing this by accident is at least 50%. So you should just leave it up to chance, and you might collect good luck as you go. Have you won on any scratch tickets lately?
Not lately.
Yeah. We should see what's new in the scratch ticket world, huh?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
This is we're in a different part. There might be different scratch tickets.
No, it's all Connecticut. There's different scratch tickets from state to state. We shouldn't know this, should we? And some states have vending machines with scratch tickets, and then you get the seasonal ones, the ones with cats and dogs. Those are the really fun ones. All right, I'm going to run my show, sweet stuff. You can stay if you can be quiet. Don't trip on the cord. Watch the cord. All right, there we go. So this book, highly recommend. Shut the door behind you, please. More than highly recommend. You absolutely must have it. This is like a life-changing, full range of emotion, full spectrum. Like, I'm reading this book, I'm crying, I'm laughing, my heart is racing because the designs are so good. I've never seen anything like them. It's just the full color wheel, right? The whole range. So let's jump in. Is it backwards day, Jess? It's always backwards day in our lives. But it was a day off because of the freezing rain today. So it's always excellent, because the freezing rain has been forecast for about, I would say, 7 days. And incredibly, despite that, the school called at like 3 a.m. on every phone that rings. Every single possible thing that they could wake us up with, they called at 3 a.m. So it's like, did you not notice the forecast 7 days ago? Because waking up at 3 a.m. is really, really my favorite. It's my favorite. Jess always makes you smile. She is a good little lady. She really is. She is such a sweetie. I hope she's good tomorrow while I'm out antiquing. But I'm going to shut my phone off just in case. So I have a lot of photographs to show you. Let's look at Esther. I want to talk about her life first. She had a very, very interesting life. This doesn't always happen. You don't always get an artist who has had this very broad, vast, and varied sort of portfolio of work that they've done over decades and had a truly colorful, wonderful, and interesting life. But she is one of these people who was lucky enough to have both. So let me do my screen share. I'm going to switch themes here and hopefully it works. It's been working great lately, right? I know you don't see anything yet. I'm just going to come on down. So this is the first one I want to show you. So this is Esther, and the years of her life are, you know what? Okay, sorry, just fooling with grids. The years of her life are 1907 to 1988, okay? She was born on March 16th, 1907. I know I have other friends born on March 16th. That's why I just paused. That's one day before my grandmother, my little Irish leprechaun. And she was born in a Ukrainian town called Bar. It was originally part of Poland, but it was later partitioned to Russia, and it's the Western Ukraine, right, as of this second. Esther was a mentor to her daughter Judy, who we'll talk about later in the book. Esther was prolific, creating over 65 rugs from 1941 to 1988. Again, I should have mentioned that this fantastic and highly recommended book I'm holding, Rug Hooking Traditions with Patty Yoder and Esther Knipe, was written by Kathy Wright, that's a W-R-I-G-H-T, and Judy Knipe. So, grand slam. So, doing rugs right up until 1988, which is the year of her death. The designs ranged from abstracts, still lifes, geometrics, impressionist paintings, Native American art, to designs based on 20th century artists like Matisse, Picasso, and others. Her rugs filled her Vermont home, and many of them were sold to collectors. So I'm going to take you on a little photo tour of her. My computer's playing up a little bit, but we're okay. of some photographs. So this is her, these are her parents. Here we go again. Okay. These are her parents, Sholem Rutberg and Sonia Vilner, married sometime before 1900, date unknown, in Russia, which is the country of both of their births. Today, again, that region is the Western Ukraine. So what we know about them is the family spoke and read Yiddish. Sonia, the mother, was the eldest of 9 children, and because both of her parents worked, when she was about 10 or 11, she began to run the household, raising her brothers and sisters with the help of servants, right? So they were middle-class people. They were Eastern European Jewish family. Sonia was educated. She was fluent in Russian, but at home they spoke Yiddish. Despite her household responsibilities, Sonia found a lot of time to read the works of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky in Russian, right? So she was multilingual and very, very beautiful. Sholem, the father, was already engaged to another woman from his hometown when he took a business trip to Bar and saw Sonia. And this is like one of these fairy tale stories. They both fell in love, and Sholem broke off the engagement, courted Sonia, and married her fairly quickly. And they started a life together at her family home, the Vilners family home. And let me move on to the next photo. See, sorry, my list is jumping each time, so there's going to be a small hesitation. He was already engaged to somebody else, but he was so struck with her beauty when he saw her. She has that Eastern European, Russian, sort of sad eye, beautiful somber look, disappointed Madonna, right? Absolutely beautiful. Rita, good to see you. Rita says, Kathy Wright is a coordinator of the Sauter Rug Hooking Week. Not only a fabulous author, but she puts on a great show there. Well, that is coming up this year too. That's another date we should put on our calendars. That's exciting. That and the biennial this year, we've got a lot happening, right? Interesting. Good to know. Thank you, Rita. Hope everything's good with you, by the way. So they got together, and Sholem was a moderately successful businessman. He owned his own cigarette factory. This is going to sound like a joke, but it's not, until it burns down. And then he would have been taken up by the Russian army at that point. There are so many countries to this day where you are forced to it's not a question of being enlisted. You are forced to participate, and that was coming up for him. So he decided to, in 1907, leave for America on his own, sort of pave the way, blaze the trail for the family, and was hoping for a better life and the American dream. So he went to the U.S., and I just want to say, I'm not going to get into the family because this book is really definitive, right? At the family tree, the entire story of the family's life is very, very well sketched out, articulated, researched. Everything is in place. So you can read a lot more about all of the children in the family. But the family is still abroad until 1910 when Sonia, and so far she's had 3 children, Julius, who's 7, Betty, who's 5, and Esther, who's 3. So Esther's 2 years younger than her older sister. And they are very similar and very close through their lives. And of course, Esther, being the younger sister, will try as she gets older to really emulate Betty, as younger sisters always do, right? So they come over to the U.S. and they settle in New York City on the Lower East Side, on East 10th Street between Avenues A and B, if you know that area. So they're there, and Sholem opens several businesses, including a fabric store and a laundry. None of them go spectacularly crazy in terms of being super successful, but it's certainly enough to support the family. Sonia and his children always spoke about him, their dad, with warmth, love, and respect, and he was described as a warm man who was full of life, and he loved dancing and opera and politics and religion, but most of all, he loved his family. And at home, he and Sonia usually spoke Yiddish, although the kids mostly spoke English. However, Esther, as an older person, recalled that she and her sister Betty were often teased and called greenhorns because their Russian accents were so strong, even though they were English speakers. So they worked very hard to not only eliminate the Russian accent, but eliminate the New York accent. And apparently they spoke beautifully, probably that sort of Audrey Hepburn, Katharine Hepburn kind of a voice, right? Very neutral, well-educated, high-class American voice from that time that you remember from the old-time movies, right? So the Rutbergs lived in the city, 6 children, lots of friends, lots of visitors coming over from abroad, lots of entertaining. Sonia was busy all the time, the mom with all of these kids, keeping a kosher home. She did everything herself. She cleaned, she cooked. She did not share her kitchen. Her daughters did not inherit her talent for cooking because she liked to do everything herself. Everybody loved to eat, but she didn't pass on that skill to them. She was the queen of the kitchen. Her strawberry jam and her strudel were among the family favorites. I have to read this part because it's so beautiful. It's something that Judy, that will be Esther's daughter, we're going to get to her in a second, wrote later. So because Judy is the co-author of this book, she puts in lots of sort of reminiscences and nostalgia, family stories that are so beautiful that they stand alone. I would love to hear more of them. I would love to hear a whole book of them. And she writes, when Sonia made strawberry jam in the summer at the farm, first she and I picked wild strawberries from the hillside. Then Sonia set out a pan of hulled berries, sprinkled with sugar, and left the pan in the hot sun until the berries released their juices and the sugar had melted. She was a fabulous baker of breads, cushions, poppy seed cookies, and strudel. Esther used to describe coming home from school, opening the front door, and inhaling the intoxicating aroma of just baked little yeast buns filled with pureed split peas and garlic. When my grandmother made strudel, she wore a large, clean white apron and a white bandana to keep the hair out of her eyes. She washed her hands and then spread out a white bed sheet on her enameled kitchen table with its leaves pulled up and opened. She floured the sheet, then she lifted the ball of dough into the backs of her hands. Slowly, evenly, she stretched out the dough, gently using her knuckles until the ball of dough became a huge, translucent, pale tan sheet, which she carefully laid on the table. Next came the filling, melted butter, raisins, chopped nuts, apples, spices, and then she rolled it up, cut it to fit into the pan, and baked it. It was the best strudel. Those kinds of family memories, what is life about if not those stories, right? Other people's families too, right? It's so nice to hear them. So Esther and Betty were very, very close, being the 2 girls and quite close to each other in age. They often dressed very similarly, wearing Egyptian cotton shirts in emerald green that they dyed in emerald green and bright purple, very bohemian, right? And apparently their voices were indistinguishable over the telephone. Like they sounded so similar. I'm sure this effort of trying to sort of exorcise any kind of an accent resulted in a very neutral voice. But the sister Betty in the early 1920s decided to drop out of high school. Oh, hi Joy. Good. And she is not. The sisters are teasing each other. Joy, good to see you. You are not late. You are fine. So her sister dropped out of school in the early 1920s and started working at a bunch of bookstores and art galleries. And this is going to set the stage for both of their interests and tastes, right? So they both cut their hair quite short in the early 1920s and went to poetry readings and anything that happened at a gallery in Greenwich Village. It was just a moment in time, right? This is a time when New York City is really the hub of the universe as far, well, obviously London too, but as far as intellectual pursuits and characters, famous characters. Esther described to her daughter Esther describes to Judy later in life 2 pivotal moments during her teenage years. And the first occurred when she was about 15, walking uptown on the east side of Fifth Avenue, right across from the glorious main branch of the New York Public Library. Seeing those paintings suddenly her attention was caught by an exhibit, right? So besides those beautiful lions, they have art in the window. In those days, all department stores, libraries, all public buildings had art exhibits. It was a real thing. And there was art hanging in the window of the library. And she said, seeing those paintings for the first time, they must have been Impressionist or Post-Impressionist, maybe even Cézanne. But she experienced an almost physical shock and a sense of joy that she never forgot. And then in her mid-teens, Esther knew that she didn't want to work in an office and she didn't want to work as a salesperson or a shopkeeper. And she wanted to study art. So she put that to her parents. You can imagine how well that went. They insisted that she took a secretarial course and then went to work. And one day in Morningside Park, she sat down on a big rock and felt helpless at the prospect of this dismal future of working in an office, and she began to cry. And she remembered this incident years later as an adult as being one of these important and crystallizing moments of self-awareness that just stops you in your tracks, right? She took a job when she was 18 as the social director at the Unity House, which was in the Poconos, so the rural part, actually the Pennsylvania Poconos, the summer camp where people would go. Do you remember both Dirty Dancing and the series, the Mrs. Maisel series? It really, really, both of those movies really show what summer camps, particularly for people who were Jewish, were like, because they were very separate and different, right? They were for people who had money and could afford to be there, but it was like a world of its own, right? It was completely separate and very glamorous. And she worked at one of these. It was run by the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. What a mouthful. And while she was there, she taught, I'm going to share my screen again, calisthenics, right? And there's this beautiful picture of her teaching, right? So there she is on the far left, and all of these people, older people, young people, all different shapes, copying what she's doing. There's a little stage set up for her. Caroline says, suffered from congestive heart failure, but better now. Okay. I'm glad that you're feeling better, Caroline. Oh dear. So this is a kind of happy go-between. This is a summer thing. She's not absolutely forced into work. And what she does a couple years later is get married, right? Because this is what happens, isn't it? She's not going to do the things that she's supposed to do because the idea is miserable. So instead, let me get rid of this one. She marries. And, this seems like the ideal marriage. This is Alec, right? They married in 1928 in Pennsylvania. They moved to Allentown. He's tall, handsome. He's very, very sort of melancholy person. Sounds like he might be a bit depressed in nature. Self-educated, super intelligent, interested in arts and literature. A musician. He won a scholarship, as a flautist to music school. But when he married, he gave up his musical career to be the family wage earner, right? So it seems like this would be a good match. And they move out to Allentown, Pennsylvania. And he's actually working for his sister and her husband. They have a corset company. And he's training women to do door-to-door sales work for the Cheris Corset Company. And Esther refuses to wear corsets. So she's like a bad calling card in and of herself. That causes a lot of consternation in the family. It's almost like defying the family business and the source of income. They have a daughter in 1932, Judy, and this is a great cause for joy. So, at this point, Alec, Esther, they're part of the Philadelphia intellectual life, right? They're very involved in politics. Esther studies at the Philadelphia Sketch Club. She's doing paintings, portraits, still lifes, landscapes, very, very heavily influenced by Impressionist artists. But by the time that Judy is 3, as happens, things are not going well with them as a couple, and they decide to get a divorce. Her parents, it says, I'm reading, her parents' marriage was in the shambles, eroded by acrimony. That's a word you don't hear all the time. Matrimony, acrimony, meaning just terrible, terrible feeling on both sides, terrible feeling and rapport on both sides. So that marriage ends. And when it does, Esther finds a teaching job in Mohegan, New York. It's part of Westchester County. So, northern Westchester County. And she gets a job as a kindergarten teacher. So she moves out there with Judy, and they're living in this beautiful little house that's owned by a dentist. And it has like a little doll house, like a little smaller house on the property. And in the summer, her and Judy move to the little doll house. And I think the story was the main living quarter was taken up by a man called Peter Knipe. Now he's going to be the next sort of cog in this story. First of all, this is Judy. Oh no, wait a minute. Let me shrink it down. Oh no, it is. She just moved. So this is Judy, right? The little daughter. And here comes Peter. Nope, that's her parents. I didn't realize that was still up. Don't mind me. Don't mind me. I'm just fooling around. Here comes Peter. He's super handsome, I think. Super handsome. So Peter's living on the property as well. And of course, they find each other. It sounds like a beautiful property, fish pond, big lawn, the large main house with chicken coops, and just a beautiful, very sort of rural place to be. Peter is working at the Mohegan Modern School, and he's teaching shop. He's already worked as a house painter and a carpenter, and they soon start dating. And in 1938, Peter, Esther, and Judy, they are now like a family, right? They become a family. Judy calls him Daddy, and they decide to move to Providence, Rhode Island, right? One of my favorite places. I'm a Rhode Islander. They moved to Providence. This is one of the great eras of Rhode Island history. On their way to the new place that they were going to be moving to, they drive through the devastation of the 1938 hurricane. And I think that's an interesting note because it's just this time in history. There are so many things going on that are huge moments in history. That 1938 hurricane we still talk about. Like people talk about it all the time. It's how many people can say that they clearly remember what happened at that time. But it's an interesting note that while they were on the move as a new couple and hence a new family, they're on their move to Providence and they are driving through this part of Rhode Island that was so hard hit by the hurricane. It must have been so heavy and surreal to see all that. I missed part of that, but I'm glad won $10. Oh, maybe it's me. Maybe it's me. But yeah, the hurricane thing, they settle in Rhode Island, and I love this part because I'm a Rhode Islander. They have a little house in Apponaug, which is like a cove, and it came with a little sailboat and a screened-in porch. The icebox was out on the screened-in porch. It was actually a summer house, right? But it sounds so adorable. This is where they start their life with kerosene stoves for heat. The bathroom was downstairs in the cellar, apparently where the witches lived, or at least that's what they joked about. The kitchen sink was black. And this is Judy relaying this because she remembers all of these moments. They did many, many moves in their lives, but the sink was black. And of course, in Grandma's house, the sink was white and very, very clean and perfect. But they settle here for a while. Esther would paint during the day. Let me show you that. It's a beautiful painting of her as a young woman right at this moment. Esther painting. So that's Peter. That's Esther. Beautiful moment in time. Oh, Karen, were you born in Providence? I lived in Barrington. I grew up in Barrington. I still absolutely love Rhode Island. My heart is definitely there. So she paints during the day, and he's off at work in Providence, right? So the radio is full of bad news at this point. As you can imagine, everything is stories about German aggression. The Nazis have invaded Czechoslovakia, and of course, Esther's family is Jewish, and this is where she comes from, and this is deeply disturbing to her. She apparently couldn't stop talking about it. So this is a very hard time for her, being so far away and being such a political person. Not really being able to do anything about it and just having to feel these waves of horror coming through the radio from so far away. But it was also this winter that Judy celebrated her first Christmas, right? So Judy, the daughter, Peter convinced Esther that no childhood was complete without having a Christmas. So they borrowed $10 from a loan company, and Judy still remembers the farm was 100 miles upstate from New York City, located on Ferris Lane, which was then a dirt road. The property consisted of, so it sounds like they're on the, oh, I'm sorry. I turned to the wrong page. Sorry about that. Judy remembered, that was a spoiler alert. Judy remembers they borrowed the $10, and to her surprise, walking out on Christmas morning, there was a tree in the window, shining with tinsel, colorful wreaths, and beautiful Czech ornaments, right? The German glass and the Czech ornaments that the family had used for years. So they were celebrating some of Peter's traditions, and finally Judy celebrates her first Christmas. They spent 1 year in Apponaug, and then they moved to Providence, where they got an apartment on College Hill. And Karen, you will know, and anybody who's been to Providence will know College Hill is absolutely beautiful. That's where Brown is, Brown University. It is so atmospheric, old school, beautiful, stirring, haunted feeling up there. It has such atmosphere. That's a very neighborhood that they moved to. So they got their first dog, a Cocker Spaniel called Pandora. Judy went to school there, and Esther took classes. She took some art classes. They had a really nice time there, a really nice time. This is the middle of the Depression, remember, but they are doing quite well, all things considered. But a year later, it turns out that they moved to Patuxent, Pleasantville. So it was they moved to Pleasantville, New York. Peter got a job there, right? So this is how it goes. He gets a better job and they have to keep moving. It's a tough time. Fall of 1941, he gets a job in New York City and the family moves to Pleasantville, a suburb. So this is where they land next. And this is the year that the family had never celebrated Thanksgiving. So this is the first year, 1941, that Esther makes her first Thanksgiving dinner. And she cooks everything from soups to breadsticks to turkey, stuffing. She made apple pies. It was a huge success. It was also in this year, things are changing fast for this family, but also this year Judy joins the Brownies, like the younger chapter of the Girl Scouts. It's a lively time, and very, very fast moving, and I'm sure life is feeling fleeting and impermanent with everything that's going on in the news. So they are actually living in Pleasantville, and World War II officially breaks out, but also during the year that they're living there, Esther starts rug hooking, right? So two really important, very different things happen in that year. Peter immediately volunteers for military service, but they tell him, number one, he's too old, and number two, he's colorblind. So this whole chapter, they're living in this rambling house that's quite shabby, and with terrible heating, kerosene stoves in the dining room, the kitchen, the living room, but the bedrooms were freezing cold apparently, so they slept with many layers of clothing on. And Judy said later it was a very Knipe house, right? Because they're just from house after house, they're choosing, or they just happen to find on a set budget houses that are quite similar, have certain problems in common. So Judy calls it a very Knipe house. That would be a great title for a book. And World War II is raging during this time, so this is really in the front of everybody's mind. They move in 1943 to Pine Plains with Betty, who's the sister, remember, that's 2 years older, and her husband David. They buy a house together as two families in Pine Plains, which is in Dutchess County, very rural, rolling farmland, an abundance of dairies and orchards. I mean, it's absolutely idyllic. It's a huge property, and I have a picture of that. Let me show you so you can picture. Oh, wait a minute. First, let me show you Esther, Peter, and Judy, right? Because they really became a family when they married, right? The three of them, it was just at this point, the three of them against the world, right? So that's them. And then this is them at their house in Rhode Island, right? And just so you know, this is like a crease across the photo. There's not like police tape or anything like that. But this is outside that little house. And now they are here. So this is the house, that big farmhouse that they're sharing with the sister. So this is where they land for a while. Again, very idyllic and rural. It has a beautiful barn on the property, which is apparently sort of a celebrated old building, and a lot of people coming by and taking photographs in front of it. So that must be an exciting little touch. But it's about 100 miles upstate from New York City. 30 acres. It's a 16-room house with a corn crib, two handsome large red barns, and a hen house. Large perennial garden with white, pink, and blood red peonies. Stand of tall lilac bushes, phlox. I mean, rose bushes. It just sounds amazing. Greening's apple orchard, large blackberry patch bearing huge juicy berries. I mean, this is just like a real moment in time, isn't it? Most people don't ever get this in their life. They lived very simply because they could live off this land too, right? So they were living quite simply. The first year they owned the farm, 1943, Esther and Judy lived there full time, and Peter only came up on weekends from the city on the train. They all loved this house. Esther, the kitchen was so big that was Esther's hooking studio. So it was, they weren't crammed in. It was a gigantic house, but because of the heating situation, again, only certain parts of it were warm. Concern about the war is universal at this point because they're in the middle of it. So most people in their lives will know somebody who is very heavily involved, like immediately involved. And in this family, the person who's involved is actually Esther's brother. Let me show you a picture of him. Let me come up a little bit here. Jerry. So Jerry is a photographer. I don't know how I did that. Wait a minute. Let me get rid of this one. And there we go. So this is kind of like a collage, right? Let me tell you what's in this. So Jerry is Esther's brother. And he is actually, he's a war photographer. He's on the European front, and he's following the army from Italy up through France and into Germany, right? Like the hornet's nest of the problem. He received a superficial head wound in France in 1945. But this photo at the top right, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but at the top right, those two soldiers, his photo made the cover of Life magazine in March 27, 1945, right before the war ended. So he was a very well-known photographer, a very successful photographer, and the photograph on the bottom became an iconic photograph, especially for the Germans. It really marked the end of the war. So his photographs were obviously emotional, devastating, and important, right? So just another neat kind of link to this chain. Another interesting thing, during this time, we're going to get to rugs. I just want to set up the family stuff first because I think this family story is just like a to die for epic kind of a story. During this time, Peter's working in Manhattan. Well, what is he doing there? He's working on the Manhattan Project, like the Manhattan Project. So the agency engaged in developing, of course, the first atomic bomb. He never told the family where the building was or what the work consisted of, but this is what he was doing. So in 1944, they moved to Inwood, I-N-W-O-O-D, which is on the tip of Manhattan. And they moved to this kind of tenement apartment on the 4th floor that they all hated. And they dubbed it the Palm Tree because apparently it was one long hall with all of these small rooms sprouting off the one end of it. So this was not a particularly, coming from the farmhouse, this was not an ideal kind of a move. It was a parallel or a move downward, but they moved there for the moment. And again, by the early 1950s, right, because they are country people at heart, Esther and Peter are longing for a home back in the country. So they end up going to Vermont and discovering Vermont. And they buy a house in 1954 on Church Street in Dorset, Vermont, which is a very pretty town. It was a listed 1861 like classic Vermont farmhouse, 2 acres of land with a barn and a stream, a pond on the property that the town owned, where you could go trout fishing. It was stocked, and the kids used it in the winter for ice skating. It just sounds like heaven. So this is where they ended up next. Let me show you the next photos I have for that. My photos are jumping a little bit, but we're going to get there. Let's see. I'm going to put Jerry here. I wanted to show you this nice photo. This is on Peter and Esther's 10th anniversary. I just thought that was a really beautiful shot of them because it still really looks like them, doesn't it? Just a little bit older. And then let me do this one. Ooh, I have them out of order. Okay, wait a minute. Something bad. Oh, the Dorset house. This is what I want. So let me make it a little bit, well, let me do that. So this is where they ended up in Vermont. And this is really like homestead, family homestead. This is really where they end up. So 1954, they make this move. And, life is going to quiet down, right? Judy's getting older. Let me show you that collage I took the photo that was like a little collage from the 1980s. I think this is a beautiful mixed image. So you see Judy with the dark hair in quite a few of the photos, and you see Esther getting a bit older and Peter getting a little bit older. Crafter's Grimoire says, my father was a machinist on the Manhattan Project. Interesting. My mother brought my elder sisters out there, and they were not allowed to reveal the location. It was all top secret. How interesting is that? Wow, they were busy. And one of the other funny side notes to the story is that when Peter was not able to enlist, he started drawing plans for a boat, like a war boat, like a military boat. Boat's the wrong word. But he ended up doing that, and he sent his plans, right, because he's a very good artist, to Washington, and incredibly, somebody else had already started working on the design for a boat that was very, very similar. So they didn't need his designs in the end, but had somebody not just been a little bit ahead of him, he would have contributed to the war with this amazing design for this important boat. I don't know if it was a submarine or not. I can't remember. But Esther, okay, so this is the last years that we're getting into now, and then we're going to switch to looking at some of the art. So let me just make sure, I want to be sure that I'm caught up with photographs before we look at art. Let's look at this nice image of Esther. I just love this. Don't you? I mean, doesn't everybody's photos from the 80s look like this? Like the hat, the sweater, and in the bottom right, Esther there on the couch with a little candlestick and beautiful furniture around her, beautiful painting behind her. That bull is one of her rugs. That's one of her hooked rugs that she's sitting with. It's draped over the couch. But you see her with their, what looks like a Highland Terrier and Peter outside painting. Beautiful picture with Judy. Beautiful picture. Peter obviously grows a beard later in life. I mean, it's just, moving through the pictures of this family, I just found very touching. Very, very touching. And a picture of Esther hooking. Right, so beautiful. She hooked on a very simple frame, nothing with these carpet grippers, nothing like what we use now. We'll talk about her supplies in just a few minutes. I want to show you one more picture of her for a minute with her hoop in her hand. I mean, she's just stunning, isn't she? She's got one of these kind of like Trifari or Napier type necklaces. Remember those that sat very flat, very bold statement. She's just a beautiful woman. So Peter retires in 1972, and they spend the last 11 years of his life in Dorset, at this house in Vermont, painting, doing art, thinking, just having a nice life. And they agreed, a few weeks before his death, he said to Esther, we really have had a good life. And she said, yeah, we have. It's been great. And, when you think about it, she had her divorce early on in her marriage. She found Peter immediately. They made a family with the daughter from the first marriage, and they had a wonderful life. Choking myself up, but this is just, it's a beautiful story. So Peter passes away, and Esther calls Judy in 1987 to say she's been diagnosed with lung cancer. Esther has been smoking since she was 13, and she didn't stop until she was 78. So, they brought her to New York City to an oncologist, and she did radiation and 2 rounds of radiation and chemotherapy, but nonetheless, she died in June of 1988. And just another side note, one of the things that I couldn't stop thinking about reading this story was that they didn't spend a long time in Rhode Island. It sounds like they spent 2 years in Rhode Island, but Esther would have crossed with one of my other most beloved rug hookers of all time, Molly Nitobe from Barrington, Rhode Island, because Molly Nitobe was regularly taking classes on College Hill, right, where Esther lived, at all these institutions that were really just for women, right? They weren't really, Molly always was fighting with people to get into classes that were also for men. And I would be so surprised if they didn't cross over with each other at some point. The thing was, Molly taught, she was really involved in the rug cooking scene, but Esther didn't, right? She was a loner. She didn't belong to groups or guilds or even informal hooking circles. But I wonder if during those years in Rhode Island, before they moved back to New York and then to Vermont, if she crossed wires with her. I would love to do research and find out what I can find out sometime in the near future, because I just think that's a remarkable coincidence, because their work is quite similar too. And I'll show you an example of that in just a minute. So let's talk a little bit about, I feel like I'm doing good for time because I wanted to do family history and then look at the rugs together. So again, this book is remarkable. This is my source for tonight. I highly recommend. I feel like you must have this book in your library. You must. It's so good. We're just looking at the second half of the book on Esther Knipe, right, by Judy Knipe, her daughter. And the first half of the book is about Patty Yoder, and we will cover that first half. We've covered the sheep book, the sheep alphabet book by Patty Yoder, but we'll cover more Patty Yoder in the future. This is a full episode just of Esther, and I did not want to make any kind of abbreviation to it. So there's some interesting reminiscences too as we go into the actual looking at the rugs part of this segment. This is another quote by Judy. It says, "One morning when we were living in Pleasantville at around 2 a.m., Mama came upstairs and woke me. Would you like a piece of pie?" she asked. What she really wanted was to show me the flowers that she just hooked, and I loved them. As I sat eating the warm apple pie and drinking cold milk, we discussed the colors she had used and the ones she had in mind for the rest of the rug. I was so pleased that she valued my judgment on such matters, but then why shouldn't she? After all, she'd more or less inculcated me from birth with her own taste and judgment. In fact, she told me that the first word I uttered after Mama was apple, as in a Cezanne painting. I probably pointed at an apple in the Cezanne reproduction that my parents had identified for me. Since then, whenever I'm working on a piece, which at that moment was crocheted hangings for her, Judy turns into a in her own right, very successful fiber artist too. She said, I would ask myself, would Mama like this? And if I'm sure, I say, I think Mama would like this. So just a beautiful touch, right? That they really valued and respected each other's opinions on art and on their work. And I just think that's so cute that she would go up at such a crazy time of night on the premise of having food when what she really wanted was to show off what she'd just accomplished, because it must have been successful and exciting at that moment to see those flowers come together that well. So it was in 1941 that Esther starts hooking rugs. She bought an old rug in an antique store in Pleasantville, New York, when they were living there. And she said something about the rug, the way that the stitches looked, the hand-dyed colors, the different textures of the different fabrics appealed to her greatly. And she knew she wanted to make her own rugs. So she borrowed William Winthrop Kent's The Hooked Rug from the library and later bought her own copy as well, and another book of Kent's. He has the three, of course. Both of which served as her inspiration for years. And her daughter Judy has the copies of these books now. So using a burlap sack for backing and old clothes, hand cut into strips for loops, she began to hook a small round rug with a few flowers on it in the center and another few scattered around the rim. Almost as soon as she started, she became completely committed to the process. She hooked at every spare moment, sometimes late into the night, a good time for baking pies, and hooking rugs as she sat next to one of the kerosene stoves that used to amplify the sluggish heat from the furnace. So between 1943 and 1948, they were living in that house in Pine Plains that we saw. Esther turned part of the large kitchen into a hooking studio. The big wood and coal-fired cast iron stove heated up the room and kept her comfortable for hooking on cold winter days. She showed some of her rugs at the annual Dutchess County Fair held in late summer in Rhinebeck, and she won blue ribbons. Whether living in the city or the country, Esther hooked. It also sounds like whether it was the summertime or the wintertime, she hooked. This was a really integral, central, important part of her life as soon as she discovered it. Now, I think this is interesting too. Esther's tools, right? And I want to make the point, let me just have a quick sip. I want to make the point that I always like to make, that we get so crazy about expensive tools. And wait till you see the rugs that she made using very basic tools. A hook. So the type of hook that Esther used when she began hooking is unknown. At some point in the 1960s, she came across a hook with a smaller than usual blue handle. Okay, so this has got to be the Joan Moshimer hook, right? With the blue handle, the primitive hook. That's the blue one. That fit in her palm much better than the other ones had. It became one of her favorites. So that's interesting. Otherwise, her hooks were the standard Susan Bates model. So I would be shocked if that wasn't the Joan Moshimer hook that she switched to with the blue hook part, right? Her frame, Esther hooked on a standard frame, a wooden frame that was completely free of any modern conveniences, no carpet tacking. I choked myself up, so now I'm all sinusy, right? She used carpet tacks to hold the backing down on long bars and strips of fabric to secure the sides, wood and hardwood. Yeah, it sounds like a very basic frame. Let me show you the picture of it again so you can look. It looks almost like an embroidery frame or a quilt frame. Let me put this one down. Let's go back here. So you can make comments too if you feel. We're only seeing a glimpse of it here. She didn't use a cutter, right? For years, she just cut strips by hand, but Judy, when she was older, bought her as a gift a cutter, and it became a great time savings. But it wasn't something that was important to Esther. Much of the wool that she used and the fabrics she gathered, they were repurposed from family clothing in Goodwill stores, thrift stores, church bazaars. and some new wool from her daughter's connections in the New York City garment industry and woolen mills, right? Because there's a lot going on in her family and her connections with like fabric stores and that kind of thing in Manhattan. There was always a good ready supply of wool waiting for her, one way or the other. And in terms of dyes, this is interesting. To the amazement of many, including Patty Yoder, who became Esther became like a mentor and a dear friend to her. But Patty was always amazed at the wide range of colors that Esther always had, hand dyed herself. And she only used, this is going to sound like something you've heard before because this is the same as the Alice Butler story. She only used Rit dye, right, from the grocery store. Because I think they still sell some Rit dye, but they sold a lot more in those days because people used it often, right? So she only used Rit dye. And until the early 1960s, Esther used burlap for backing. In about 1961, Judy saw someone using monk's cloth. And this is probably like Joan Moshemer school around this time. Using monk's cloth as backing, and she started to use it herself. It was a vast improvement in terms of ease and the straight lines of the weave. And Esther converted once she tried it. So that's like 1961. Until then, she's using burlap, right? 1940s to 1961. Where did she get her ideas and her designs, right? Because she does a lot of original designs. It says printed materials like magazines, postcards, books were her primary sources. She looked at the William Kent book. She looked at the Joel and Kate Kopp book, which he had. She looked at images of historic rugs. And also, during the 14 years that she lived either partly or full-time in New York City, she spent hours in the print room at 42nd Street, at the 42nd Street Library, where she researched images of like Native American weavings, Mexican rugs, Peruvian wraps, lots of things from other cultures. Karen says, my grandmother used only Rit dye. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Rit dye. It still dyes, right? It still dyes fabric. It's just like scissors and rotary cutters. They still cut. All this stuff still works. It's fun to buy fancy stuff, but all of the old stuff still works just fine. It really does. I love to hear that, though. I love to hear that. So yeah, she's pulling from a lot of sources, and she has spent years researching the things that she's interested in. So, and we know that the first thing that inspired her was the Impressionist paintings at the New York Public Library, the big one with the lions. So during the I already did that part. So once she had an idea and she would draw a sketch, Peter would transfer it onto her backing for her using the grid system, right? So like you did when you were a kid in school, you just draw a grid over it, and then you transfer the lines from one square to the next. So a bit painstaking, but hey, it worked. It worked for her, and you're going to see her rugs, and you're going to see how well it worked for her. So this book goes into a lot of detail about technique, finishing techniques, her use of color, and these are all things that I hope you get this book, and I hope you read, right, word, every word, right? This is a wonderful bedtime book, super inspiring. It's a biography as well as being like a coffee table art book. Doesn't get any better than that. In terms of signature, the only signature she ever made was a small red cat face, which was begun by Judy, the daughter. So that would be the only signature you would ever find on her work. We're on the threshold of actually looking at the rugs. In the 47 years that she hooked rugs, 1941 to 1988, Esther Knipe created well over 65 vibrant and artistic rugs. Among them were individual rugs. Others were part of a series. Designs ranged from abstract, still lifes, geometrics, impressionist painting. This is all stuff we've covered, her different inspirations. So let's look at some rugs, right? Let's look at some rugs. Linda said the book is $44 plus, on Abe's and $30 on Amazon. Okay, so that's a lot. Abe is usually the best price. Did anybody check eBay? This one I got on eBay, I'll tell you, about a few months ago. Because it had been a quite expensive. It might be. Is it that it's not in print right now? Is it not? Is it not possible to get it right from the company? Let me just look at the back really quick and see, because they have a page and you should be able to order directly from them, and then it would be cover price because these are not old books. Okay, so www.rughookingtraditions.com. If somebody has time to go there, the 3 books, the Magdalena, the Hutchinson, and this book should be there, rughookingtraditions.com. And let me know if that's a better price, because again, that should be more like cover price. I feel like cover price was in the 30s, but I got this one a while back on eBay. I think I got it for 15 or 20, which, wasn't like super cheap. I haven't seen it for like four, but you do see it cheaper than 40 something. But I'd love to know what's going on with that. I got the book a couple of months ago from a seller on Etsy. So worth the search. Put those searches into eBay. I don't know if you can with Etsy, but you put the search in and it will notify you first thing in the morning, about what the results of your search are. And this works great because I will tell you this week, this is so stupid. Two searches came through for me that I have had for about 15 years. 15 years. Same week. One of them was an issue of Display World magazine because the passion I have for old department stores and particularly the Christmas issues. I have like the whole line of Display World magazines. Some of them back in the day, I paid crazy amounts of money for like one issue. Crazy amounts because I was working on a novel that was set in a series. It was a series set in a department store in the mid 1940s, and I'll get back to it one of these days. And I wanted these for research so bad. One popped up after 15 years. It ended up being like $45, but that was a lot less than I've paid in the past for some of those. And also this week, I'm going to stop. A book popped up that I have been looking for, a novel about a department store, right? Also from I think 1956. And was listed for 100 with a dust jacket, but I have not seen that book pop up for 15 years, right? And it wasn't like it popped up 16 years ago. I just knew of it, and I have not been able to find it. So those searches on eBay work great. When you're looking for something super wacky, the sad news is someone else is looking for something super wacky too. People are bidding against me on both of those things. I mean, it's like who wants a $100 book by an author that you've never heard of, right? Or who wants this issue of Display World magazine, from September of 1956? But other people did, and it was fierce bidding. So it's worth putting that search in, and sometimes you get lucky and somebody posts something as a buy it now, and then you're in like Flynn, right? But let's keep each other updated on where we can get this book. And I'm hoping it's straight from rugcookingtraditions.com. So let's switch back over here and let's look at some of the amazing work that she did. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you comfortable with your cocktail? Linda says $35 and $89 on eBay. Yeah, give Etsy a try. Yikes. So here we go. Now, these are photographs I took from this astonishing book. I know you're all going to get this book sooner rather than later, right? I just hope that it's sooner. And I hope that it's at a price that isn't going to make you feel uncomfortable, So this is one of her Matisse pieces because we know how she feels about this era of fine art painter, right? She is a huge fan of Matisse and Cezanne, particularly their still lifes. These are images, this one and the next one that we looked at when we ran our Designing Like Matisse workshop. Maybe that's one that we should revisit. Okay, Courtney, thank you. $29.95 plus shipping on the actual site. There you go. So don't make a move until you go to the actual site, rugcookingtraditions.com, $29.95. That is the actual cost of the book. So don't pay a penny more than that. That's what it costs. Thank you, Courtney. That is good sleuthing. By the way, that advertising image you sent me, I have not forgotten. I just haven't found it yet. Okay, Linda. Yeah, that's good too. 30 on Etsy. Yep, Linda and Courtney have the best prices right now. Those are quite good prices. That's what it costs. So I'm happy about that. So the Matisse, this is obviously inspired exactly from a Matisse painting, and Matisse is copyright free. So this is all well and good. This is the first Matisse that she does. She does many Matisses, and this is the second. I'm sorry, this one's even a little bit out of focus. But you probably recognize these compositions because he was so well known for framing out his still lifes with either a window or an open door, or in this case, it's hard to tell. It looks like a rug that's been pushed up the wall a little bit, but he always frames his still life with something, and he's not secretive about how he does it. It's a device, it's a trick. But he likes to do this. He likes to add a layer of interest behind his still life to create confusion. This is part of what he does. I love this statue, the sort of stone statue of the two characters embracing. There's like a couple of nudes off to the left, but he always loved his fruits, his bright colors, and these are the things also that Esther really liked too. So those are two. Let me just scroll up a little bit. Come on, you. Let me get rid of this one. This is really interesting. I'm sorry about the size of this. I'll pan in a lot more. This piece is called Interior, right? And this is in the collection of Judy, the daughter. So Judy has a lot of these. I'm gonna make this much bigger for you, but this is a really interesting piece. 30 inches by 90 inches, right? So for us here, this is tricky. Let me make it bigger, smaller. Wait a minute. Uh-oh. Hang on. It's playing me. It is playing me. Come on. Where are you, you little... There we go, you little stinker. All right. So, yeah, it doesn't want to do it. It doesn't want to do it. You know what? Forget it. So, what I wanted to say about this, you just have to look at it real close. Put some good old glasses on, right? I love this because if this is a known work, I don't know it, right? So, if this is copied from something, please let me know because I don't recognize it. What I love about this is the sort of convergence of so many perspectives. This is this moment of art, right? It has that Matisse feeling, almost a Calder, almost an Alexander Calder feeling, that sort of mobile feeling in the center with those shapes, very mid-century shapes swirling around, but in a vase, right? Very odd, almost like an altar, right? Up on this boxy piece of furniture, squared out with kind of quilty shapes, patterning all around. But doesn't this remind you of when you're younger, if you took art classes, you were in school, and they would tell you to draw a horizon line and then draw all kinds of lines from a point on the horizon, and you would end up with all of these lines radiating out at angles, right? This is what this reminds me of, because she's got right through the middle, she's got the horizon lines that go from behind that piece of furniture where the floor is, the actual horizon, up to the top where the top of the curtain is, right? There's like a theatrical swag, kind of a curtain. And then it's a bit of a patchwork behind the vase or around the window with lots of stripies, lots of kind of stained glass / stripe patterning. But that break in the middle breaks things for you, even though it's very congested and busy. And on the roof, you get almost this crazy architectural, castle on the Loire kind of a ceiling with this broken up geometry, stars on the ceiling, individually painted, almost like tiles, right? Very, very fancy and fine. And likewise, mirrored on the bottom, again, a very tile effect with these perspective lines coming out towards you. Very inviting, very colorful, completely different, right? Completely different. I've never seen anything like this. I find this an extraordinary piece. And let's see, let me move on. I want to keep running because we got a lot to lopsided, very gentle, soft shapes. I hope that we're okay with the live feed because it just flashed. I hope we're still live. Please let me know if we are. But the contrast of the blue and red, great contrast already, right? But I love the blue striping on top with that very flat kind of checkered tablecloth red on the bottom. Very flat, no attempt at perspective or those lines moving toward the horizon, just flat. So very, very, very different. I'm so worried that I am not live. Denise said, I just purchased our Rug Cooking Traditions Magdalena Brenner on Amazon, 24 plus shipping. Patty Yoder and Esther Knipe, 30 plus shipping. Okay, we are live. Thank you, Courtney. Whew, I thought I was just running my mouth for absolutely no reason. What a relief. This is definitely a Matisse because this has got three of his classic elements, right? This one's not open, but the window, the theatrical curtain, the swag, right? A piece of textile that is really breaking up the composition, and then the bowl of fruit. And it's often repeat fruit, isn't it? He's not doing like restaurant display fruit where he's giving you a banana, a cantaloupe, and a watermelon. He usually gives you multiples of the same fruit. And why is that? Because multiples are so strong in composition. You see a bunch of oranges, it's better than seeing one. You see a bunch of different fruits, and you cannot get that color harmony going to the rest of the composition. He wants to save his fire for the rest of the composition, where he fully plans to go berserk with color. So he keeps the oranges the same. He does this in everything that he does. I think these are all hooked rugs by Esther, right? I think these are all extraordinary. And this is an extraordinary one. Now, this could be, I'm wondering if this is a Cezanne. I think this is still a Matisse. I cropped this one a little bit on top. I'm sorry. There's like another hair on top. The vessel, that white vase, that pitcher, is cropped in the original rug, but not quite this much. So again, beautiful elements happening here. This pink shell, interesting kind of tea, different drinking vessels, a little bit exotic. still life, and then the repeat of the same fruit. And again, this wonderful device of using a very flat textile pattern, almost a cloud-like pattern, right? Very stark, bold, and dynamic, white on black print, right? A little cloud shape on black. Really, really interesting, and this is still the era of her being very inspired mostly by Matisse and Cezanne. So, and then let's come to this piece, which is very different. I'm just going to scroll up a little bit. So this is a calf. She did this in the 1970s. This was one of Patty Yoder's favorite rugs of Esther. This one's very different. It doesn't say anything further about it. All I can say with this is that the cropping is unusual, but that is one of the devices of the mid-century of MCM design, right? It's got a lot going on. It's got that touch or that hat tip to Mondrian with the blocks of color, particularly the red, the blue, the white, and the black. So the palette is very limited. She's got a lot of kind of Art Deco patterning going on behind the calf. The red eye, very Picasso, but then she's got this really beautiful filigree chain on the right, repeating the red, the white, the blue, and the black. I just find this very, very interesting. In the border, she's got either black or green or something in between, kind of tigery hooking, right? And we do know that she often worked with recycled materials, so it's entirely possible that she ran out of stuff, or maybe she was giving that hat tip. She had the book by Joel and Kate Kopp. Maybe she was giving that hat tip to the antique rugs and trying to break up the background marble cake or in some fashion to reflect, the running out of fabrics that rug hookers of an earlier generation would have had to deal with and solve. This is another really beautiful, different piece, her red horse. This was done in the 1960s. It's 41 inches by 25 inches. It doesn't say particular things about these pieces, so we can it's up to us to interpret. This is very Picasso for me. I love the kind of plate on the chest of the horse. I love the black line of definition. I love the busyness of the textured wool in the background and the utter flatness of the red, right? Huge impressionist slash expressionist feeling happening here with the modern movement. This very, very, very flat color, almost like one of Matisse's collage pieces that he would paint on paper and then cut out shapes out of paper that he had painted to make sure that he had the color that he wanted, the vibrancy, the opacity that he wanted, but that absolutely flat, unchanging color, right? And I love the few very sparing lines, but very well done. And do you notice at the bottom, she put tassels of wool strips to kind of mimic the mane on the horse, but those are tassels hanging down. I thought, oh man, that is really different. What a great idea. Very, very cool. I often wonder about the possibility of putting, because I'm so into this multimedia thing right now, the possibility of putting like a macrame bottom onto a rug hooked piece, or going part way and somehow integrating hooking or proddy or different rag rug making technique, not weaving, with macrame. How would that work? Could that work? Because macrame has that symmetry and geometry of knots. It's got a formula that really can be offset with the wildness and lack of symmetry that you see in hooked rugs, right? Interesting. A conversation for another time. So red horse followed by, this is actually a black bull. It looks blue and do you want? My mom's at the door. Are you asking me if I want a grilled cheese?
You're going to have any of this on it?
I am. She's asking me if are you all, oh, wait a minute, I'm off camera. I wonder if you're all aware of this. We shop a lot at the Indian import store. This is the hottest stuff on earth, the green chili. So yes, I would love a huge, disgusting grilled cheese with some, just put a little bit on top because I suffer. I suffer like you can't imagine when there's too much. But that is the best stuff on earth. Talk about clean your sinuses out. So black bull, let's come back to black bull. Not blue, black, completely black. This is just bad coloring with my phone. But you can see that she did a lot in the background with patterning, diamond shapes. Has a sketch quality, doesn't it? Really beautiful. Again, to me, this is like screaming Picasso's name, right? Partly because of the bull, partly the reference to Spain, partly because it looks like it might be sculpture, right? It's just a beautiful, interesting piece. Oh, Teddy's up there. So let's see. Where did we end off? The bull Oh, okay. So this next piece. So, these are the ones that were inspired by her Expressionist, Impressionist period. Now, we're coming into a period that is slightly more traditional, maybe looking more at the William Kent books than at the Impressionist art books. This is a cornucopia piece. It's actually called Garden, hooked on burlap. This is late 1940s. So maybe the chronology is off. Maybe this is actually earlier. But to me, this is the ultimate. Like, this is my favorite piece I've ever seen. Dave, right? We're on the same page with our cuisine. Love grilled cheese sandwiches. My mom's like, do you want to order sushi tonight? And I do love sushi, but I said, you know what? I'll take a grilled cheese with that fiery Indian stuff on top so I don't sleep well. But this piece is beautiful. What I love about it are the cornucopias. So it's a very traditional rug hooking design, but you can see she took quilt elements. She took that central idea. It's a square, right? This piece is 70 by 71. She took that central square, almost architectural. She put like that kind of zigzag around the edge, which is a bit like, it's got the hit or miss values to it, right? But it does have a quilty feel, right? It's very, very asymmetric. There is a tear on top if you're looking at that too. You had one for supper too, Linda. That's funny. We're all feeding off the same menu. But I love this because I love the way that the cornucopias have been handled. We almost always see cornucopias in the corners, but in this case, we're seeing them top, north, south, east, west, top, bottom, side to side. And I love that one of the cornucopias is distinctly blue and the one on the top is more of a gray blue and otherwise yellow, because it does for me bring up that historical question: did she run out of material? It is the 1940s. She's just made it through the Depression. It is now war years. She might well have run. I mean, I wouldn't expect her to be buying wool anywhere at this point. It would not have even been an option. So I'm guessing possibly that background that's very marble cake, very streaky, right? I'm guessing that is a product of having run out. And I'm guessing that possibly the cornucopia action too is a product of having run out. I'm just going to turn the heat up for myself here because it is getting cold. I have to admit, this is very traditional, but this is my absolute favorite of her rugs. Let me know in the comments too which one is your favorite, because I always like to know what other people are admiring. It makes me look at it a second time, This one I really love too. So this is another. What is she doing, right? What witchcraft is this? This is unbelievable. It's like the center is this very traditional, almost Art Deco rug, right? She's used very simple flowers, but around the edge, she's done this, again, very quilty, very busy, kinetic, colorful hit or miss pattern with no geometry. I mean, it's all geometry, but it's a pattern, right? It's a repeat pattern. So it almost has a textile quality to it. I just find this absolutely extraordinary. She called this country rug, and this one was done in the 1970s. So her doing the really traditional rugs versus the Impressionist style rugs and rugs that are after famous paintings, it seems like the chronology of it is kind of mixed. It sounds like she's a person who does, as she should, what she feels like when she feels like it. When the spirit moves you, you do that thing, right? And when the spirit moves away from you, you do the other thing. And that's the way that life should be when you're doing artistic work and for funsies work. Now, this piece is the one I used for the thumbnail. This is Japanese Cat from 1981, 35 by 45 and a half, and this is in her daughter's collection. This is just beautiful. It does, there are so many Japanese prints with cats, right? They have always been revered and loved. It has that look, right? It really has the look of the woodcuts or those early prints. Really, really beautiful. The sort of cherry tree color, cherry blossom color, echoing in the background, the beautiful horizontal hooking. I like the curves, the very ball-like quality of the cat's body that's countered with highlights that are horizontal. So interesting on his round body, right? Cheers, my dears. I'm taking a sip. I absolutely love it. And I don't know if any of you are watching that that series Cobra Kai, right? I didn't know there was a series based on the movie The Karate Kid. But I'm deeply into it. It's the first thing I thought of when I saw that. Shame on me, right? But this is obviously on its own. Absolutely beautiful composition. Look at the way the white is nestled in so safely between all those pinks, right? In that beautiful pink and yellow sky. Beautiful, beautiful composition. It just doesn't get any better than that. This is a piece that I refer to as TV set, Brock TV set, because she loves the Impressionists. She also loves the Cubists. And Georges Braque is arguably the most famous of the Cubists. This is a play on one of his paintings. And I called it TV in my mind because the shape of the screen, it's an image set within a border. Oh, you do, Courtney. It is the best. Isn't it the best? The image set within the border, the background is so gorgeous. These flecks of browns, blacks, and blues, and then this Brock painting in the middle. It's like you're tuning in this old time TV, and this is what you get. This crazy cubist painting. She calls this piece Town. I think this is just outrageous. So pretty. Oh, wait a minute. We got a visitor. Come on, Ted. Close the door. Quick, watch the wine. Watch the cord. Watch the cable.
the cable.
Yeah, there he is.
Hey.
Teddy, I saw you writing from upstairs, you sweet person. Why do you look so scared?
Hold on.
All right, let's go back to Esther.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. All right, watch the cord. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. All right, edgy. I'm so edgy. So going away from the TV screen to Heraldic Cherries. I have a feeling it's not called Heraldic Cherries, but could be, right? So this piece is actually called, it's called Heraldic Rug. Close enough, right? Hooked on Burlap, 1950, 76 by 40. I think this is an exquisite piece. She does a lot of compositions that are based on prayer rugs, right? So she's culturally looking back on her past, on her family history, and lots of prayer rugs in this book. I'm only showing you, obviously, some of the images in this book. There's a lot more images in here for you when you find a copy of it. But I think this is just exquisite. I think the colors are outrageous. One of the things that really works for me, I love the multiples in the center, right? And for me, it does look like cherries or apples. I'm sure it's something much more meaningful, but I absolutely love it. I love the different kind of tag shapes. I'm sure that's incorrect. Going around the border, I love the prayer rug quality. I love the introduction, the filigree floral that you see here and there. But mostly, I love in the background the color changes from the grassy green to the mossy green to the golden ochre to the grays to the straws to the golden poppies. It's just all heaven, particularly when you put it right up with fire engine red and navy, right? Nebula navy and the bright red. It's just a match made in heaven. The red and the blue are working against each other in contrast, which is creating a lot of drama. And in the background, we're getting it's being very mellowed and aged by all of these antique patina type colors, right? From silvery, brassy, pewtery grays to those really golden, old gold, king's gold yellows. It is so beautiful, isn't it? I mean, this is not my kind of rug at all, but I just can't stop looking at this. That grilled cheese is not going to eat itself, though, so I better stop looking at this. Let's move on to the next one. I call this one mixtape. Let's see what it's really called. I just love the reels, the feeling of the reels around the edge. This one really reminds me of Amali Naitobi, and we'll return to her work, too, because, I've got some projects going with that. This piece is called Wheels. So I probably have the wrong reference, but it reminded me of trying to record Duran Duran songs directly from the radio by pushing the pause button after commercial breaks, and my tape coming out because of the way that I was using the tape recorder and having to, reel it back in by putting a pencil into the hole and turning it and all that stuff. That's what it reminded me of, but it's a beautiful piece. It also reminds me of the Alice Butler rugs because of that open triangle in the middle. And for Alice, she ran out of material when she did a triangle in the middle that looks like a mail slot in a door. In this case, I don't know, but this is a 1960s piece that is 34 by 64, absolutely beautiful. Another one in the collection of her daughter, Judy. And this one I called Mondrian Landing Strip, because this one reminded me of it. It was very grassy on the top and bottom. It has a real formation going, right? Almost like pencils or Crayola inside their box, right? But in that middle, it's very Mondrian, except the color light blue. It might be a solid red. It's hard to tell. It looked a bit more pastel to me, but it might just be the photograph. It might be red, yellow, blue, and blue, which would be spot on. I like the way that the light blue is used on the top and the bottom because it returns your gaze to that one light blue block, right? And it creates a sideways H. And an H is a very strong symbol in composition, right? When you look at compositions that make sense, an H is a very strong one. That H is present with that blue. But otherwise, it's a very strong composition. That shaping out almost like a fence, right? Crayola's a fence, something like that, in green, but then picking out streaky colors, very hit or miss style, and firming the whole thing up, giving it a lot of stability with just on those parts, right? Because the middle is very stable. But that green part, you can imagine if those points went right to the top and bottom of the rug, it would feel possibly unstable, right? But with that introduction of that kind of red or fuchsia stripe on the top or bottom, it really returns your eye to the second, and you're safe again. The whole thing is enclosed. The whole thing is sealed, right? It feels very stable. I think that is just another really, really different piece. Let's look at one that is called, I think this one is actually called Blue Prayer Rug. There's a few prayer rugs in this book, and many of them are very similar in composition. This is one of them. The blue one, what can you say about this? It's just so beautiful. Again, traditional, hearkening back to her history, her family history, her cultural history. Walking away to turn the heat on a little bit, but absolutely just really strong composition, repeat pattern, a little bit of a hat tip, I think, to illumination, kind of medieval design, but also it does have like ecclesiastical undertones. I mean, it certainly does. It has like a cloister type feeling to it. It has a bit of a Moroccan feel to it too. I mean, it looks like it could possibly be borrowed from tiles. It's just an interesting piece. Interesting colors, so simple, but so contemporary. This piece was done in, let's see, pink Russian rug, note Russian prayer rug, note wheels, abstract, marron, note blue Russian prayer rug, 60 by 30, done in the 1960s. So another gem, another proper gem. I hope that heater isn't bothering you, but I'm freezing. I'm freezing. I'm gonna lose the ability to click. This is another beauty, a real expressionist, right? This is another Cuban. This is not impressionism. This is moving toward expressionism and cubism. Braque, right? This is moving toward Braque. Based on a Picasso, this one. Well, there we go. Same period. Really beautiful. This green vase. Can you pick the green vase out on the top? Another little vessel to the left of it. So this is based on a still life. We've probably got one of these crazy mid-century tables in blue with the stripes, kind of with the wire leg kind of thing. Very hard to read, but it's supposed to be. That's what Cubism is about, breaking up the shapes and putting them down again in a different order so that you are challenged in looking at this piece. What does this piece have that is phenomenal and I think superior to Picasso? The patterning, right? The patterning, because his work is very, very flat. Colors, I mean, that is what it's meant to be, but I love seeing this in a rug cooking medium. That color change in the background, the green vase itself, the color change behind it with the sort of heathery purples and pinks on the right, the heathery kind of blues, right? Light blues, baby blues, navy blues, and in conjunction with, in contrast to, very solid colors. But are these normal colors? Well, no, we've got this like chartreuse vase. We've got two circle things that are probably fruits on the table, like a baby blue or a turquoise blue and a forest green. Up high, what looks like a plate of oranges, except they're not violet, they're blue violet, right? That's a crazy color. Forest green, blue violet, fuchsia, light blue, absolutely beautiful. And for all of the bluntness of this piece, for all of the blunt lines, look at the filigree handle on that green vase. That is so pretty and sexy and shapy, and it is just wildly in contrast with a lot of the other lines here. Really, really masterful. Of course, this is Picasso's composition, but she worked it this way, and I have to say, I can't imagine anything being better than that, except the cornucopias, maybe. This is another beauty. This looks like a lot of very early rugs. This is called Pink Prayer Rug. This was done in the 1950s, and based on the front piece for Kent's Hooked Rug. So William Winthrop Kent's. This is the front piece, meaning the illustration, the black and white illustration on the first page. This is based on that, but certainly different colors, right? Whatever the colors were in the original, I'm sure they weren't this. She's got that kind of cat's paw going around the border. I don't remember if that was in the original Kent piece. It probably was. But this would be based on an antique rug, and yeah, beautiful centerpiece, a little bit sort of evocative or suggestive. I don't know if that's by accident, but really beautiful shape, echoes, repeating sort of concentric lines moving away from that center design, and the kind of scalloping in the corners, maybe lamb's tongue or just scalloped off to meet the radiating lines that are coming off that central lips or whatever, that maybe just a design, right? Maybe don't read too much into it. or I get myself in trouble. But I think this is another beautiful composition, very unexpected colors, and that border is fantastic. Making that kind of a cat's paw border with the same colors that are in the composition, brilliant. Because sometimes we feel like we must make the border starkly different in dramatic and contrast, and you don't. You can do this, and those two things sing together in harmony. It doesn't have to be contrast just because the border is a different part of your composition. It can be, Courtney, it can be absolutely the same, and it's just, all your eye is doing is bouncing from circles to waves and circles to waves and all over the place because you're matching up colors as you look, and that creates interest. Your eye travels, there's drama. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a thought, right? It's a thought. Put that in your bag of tricks. Do something in the border that's very similar color-wise to what's happening in the rest of the piece. This piece I called Movie Theater Carpet, but it's actually called Red and Green Abstract. It's much better than Movie Theater Carpet, but do you still have a movie theater near you that has these beautiful, old-timey geometric carpets? And their colors are never this good. It's usually like blue and yellow, but this to me has the feeling of a movie theater carpet because the geometry is so strong. Except here there are other elements, something that looks like the four-leaf clover, and then the unexpected changes within the central motifs, the circle motifs, right? It almost looks like mathematical symbols, playing card symbols. They switch out, they alternate. So that creates more interest. Those white squares with the blue are creating a lot of stability. So with those in place, you are able to go hog wild with color throughout the rest of it. And some of the color, she's not getting complete fill in the background. And again, running out of color or what's happening there, because these are not particularly old, right? It's probably she ran out of color, or she's doing this on purpose because she's looked at that William Winthrop Kent book quite a bit, and she knows how exciting it can be when you introduce a similar color but of a different shade, right? Rose is not the same as cherry red or fire engine red. So she's got a lot of colors that are the same color family but not the same color, that are warring with each other inside this rug. But the war isn't going to go to a fatality because everything is stabilized and neutralized by the geometry of it, and particularly by those white squares with the blue insets. It's very, very strong composition-wise. But look at all that play, right? You can have both. You don't have to choose. This is the piece that more than any reminds me of Molly Nitobe. This piece is called Wheels on Red Ground. She has another one of these in this book that's the same exact composition with completely different colors. Molly Nitobe did another composition called Wheels that was nothing like this, but just very, very symmetrical and playing with geometry, the idea of the spirograph, playing with shapes in a way that was very popular in the mid-century. Now, this almost looks like a cross between like truck wheels, like tractor truck wheels and doilies, right? Because there are a lot of spokes, but at the same time, there's a bit of laciness happening. And I think these pastel Art Deco colors that she chose, in contrast with the background that seems to be hooked in like a red and black checkered flannel, doesn't it? Look like a lumberjack shirt in the background. And she's got these beautiful lacy pastel colors, ice cream colors in the foreground. Does it get any better than this on a Friday night? Come on. I mean, this is so, so, so good. I'm getting right to the bitter end here. Let's see. That was Wheels. This one I called Alexandria Prayer Rug. Now, this is the wrong orientation. This is actually, I've got this a landscape, and it's actually a portrait orientation. But this is called Prayer Rug. Many of her rugs are called Prayer Rug. So you have to kind of do heads up on that. 1950s era in her daughter's collection. This is 36 by 62. The reason I wrote Alexandria is because it has such an Egyptian feel to me. It, you know, also architectural, right? It looks like it could be almost like part of wainscoting or an inset on a wall, like a plaster inset on a very grand house. But the center is filled with very shapy motifs, and this almost looks like Jewish art to me. You often get the scatter of shapes that are very round and very colorful. So this rug has a lot of connotation for me. I like the differences in the borders from side to side. The differences in the shapes too, right? Like one of them is really cut off on the right with those red scallops, but on the left, the red scallop is much more pronounced. There's a different color checkerboard on the left, the kind of black and white Mackenzie Childs, but on the right, it's more red and white. She has a little bit of pink in the center on the right, and on the left, she sticks with light blue. It's not even, it's not symmetrical. She's got some things picked out in orange, others not at all. It's very different. It's very architectural. There's a lot of movement. And because of the solidness of the shape, right, the symmetry of the shape, it's a strong composition. And because of that, she's able to put this very unstable scatter design in the center. And remember, it would go the other way around. So you would be seeing the, on the left-hand side, that could be like a basket of something, maybe like buds coming up or something like that. I don't recognize these symbols, and maybe you do, but it does remind me of going into particularly Jewish gift stores where there's a lot of this kind of looking art, same colors, busyness of motifs, and I always grew up Roman Catholic, so I didn't have this crossover of knowledge or experience. So I wonder what this actually is in terms of content, the motifs, but no matter what it is super successful. It's absolutely a beautiful composition. And do look at the border, that right around the central kind of oval. Look at that red and blue border, and look at the blue squares in between the red squares, right? And see how she's put triangles of dark into them. Now, doesn't that give it depth? Almost like you're looking down onto a craps table or something like this. Like I don't mean to put a gambling reference onto it, but it looks like you're looking down into a very shallow table because of those diamonds of shadow, of darkness in between. I think that is so brilliant. She's just a proper artist, obviously. This is called Crazy Quilt. I mean, this is pulled from the idea of a crazy quilt rug, but right in the middle, instead of, she did a lot with busy crazy quilt motifs around the edge. Hey, Suze, I'm happy you're there too. She did a lot of busyness around the edge, and she could have gone nuts in that center with more busyness and little stitches and stuff. And I think it's really curious and interesting that instead, she just stacked colors the way that she did, right? She just stacked colors diagonally, and they're not even, right? Stacking is a very mid-century trick. Stacking colors, it's done a lot. And she has mixed kind of what looks like a possibly Victorian crazy quilt series of blocks on the border with a central block that is much more modern, much more mid-century. Really, really different and interesting piece. I can't imagine how she came up with the idea for this, because to me, I would be terrified to put something at this kind of angle, wondering if it would kind of kill the whole composition, because it has so much diagonal directional flow. But it really doesn't. Those blocks around it are fairly chaotic, and there is a lot of different geometry happening here. There's so much happening that maybe it's at odds with itself. But that black background behind that central block and the size difference is really bringing your eye to that, this kind of sandwich or layer cake of color. It is successful, and I know a bit about composition, and I can't tell you why this works, but it certainly does work. And isn't it remarkable that these are all hooked rugs? I mean, honestly, I find this crazy. So that was the last rug that we're looking at tonight. I want to just show a picture of, together, a childhood picture from 1934 of Judy, the little girl with her little beanie hat on, and Esther, right? So Judy grows up to be an artist in her own right, and I want to end the night on showing the author of this part of this book, Judy Knipe, 1930 to present. What can you say about this photo other than, when you get caught between the moon and New York City? Doesn't it remind you of the movie Arthur and Liza Minnelli and all of this gorgeousness, like the shiny silky pants, the cocktail, the long necklace? Look at the art in the background. It's like there's so much of it, it's practically touching each other, right? It's just so glamorous. I just love it. I love looking at this picture of her. But in the back of the book, it talks a bit about Judy. And she did a lot with designing handbags. And again, there's so much to read with this book. I'm going to come back to you now. There's so much to read in this book about the family. There's so much more than I was able to include in this just overview tonight. But the stuff that I was reading about Judy is very interesting because, as we already know, they were cross-pollinating in a huge way because Esther was not really mixing with other hookers. I think maybe that's the wrong thing, not really mixing. She didn't, her orbit was herself and her family, and she didn't join groups. She wasn't a joiner. So, you know, her deferring to her daughter Judy on art matters is a big deal, and vice versa. So Judy grows up to be, she hooks handbags, furniture. She creates hooked furniture, friezes, pillows, Christmas stockings, wreaths, clothing. She's one of the pioneers of like art clothing, wearable art, right? Because this is a big thing in the 80s, 70s and 80s, wearable art. Tons of books on it. In fact, much of the work that Judy did was sold in galleries, like on Madison Avenue, but also published in a book. Does anybody have this book called Art to Wear by Julie Schaffler Dale, D-A-L-E, 1986. I looked this book up. I feel like it was a book I had years ago, and I don't think I have anymore. It's an expensive book. The cheapest copy of this one was like in the 70s, and it went up to 300 anywhere, eBay, Abe, everything. But in any case, it was Judy's hooked handbags that appeared in that book. That's why I wanted to get the book if it was, you know, not 70, so that we could look at it together and look at some of her hooking, because I'm real interested in seeing some of the things that she did. But like her mom, she did a lot of geometrics, florals, and seasonal motifs. So part of this world, right, if you think about what it was like craft-wise in the 70s and 80s, Better Homes and Gardens and all those special publications they put out almost every month, those magazines were filled with projects that were arts/crafts, right? It was that big crossover. Fine arts was crossing really readily with crafts, right? And there was no looking down on the word craft. People who did latch hook, people that made purses, people that did seasonal stuff like wreaths and things, that was celebrated, proper, awesome stuff. Nobody said this is garbage, right? Her work was in galleries. So this is just another moment in time that I think we forget when we get on our high horses sometimes, thinking about rug hooking and all the fancy things that go with it. This is a moment in rug hooking too. Experimenting with making clothing and vests and hats and things, handbags and things that you could wear. So Judy really is a pioneer of this. And this book does show some of her abstract and sculptural, fiber art, hooked art, crocheted art, a lot of the things she does in her career starting in the 1950s, right? So she also has a full life of art. This is a nice picture. I wish I would have put this one in. Let me just show you that one of Judy at her hooking frame. So that's the daughter. It's a bit out of focus, but I'm not sure it's in focus. There we go. So the end of this chapter is actually about Judy. So just another reason to get this book, because you can look at it, look at some of her work, see how you feel it related to her mom's work and her mom's style, which crossed over completely. But what a beautiful book, right? What a beautiful book in general. It was a perfect thing to bring out for us tonight, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that if you're interested that you are going onto this rughookingtraditions.com and getting this book. It's a small book, but that, I mean, it's so much. It's a book you're going to look at again and again and again, right? Really, really beautiful. Patty Yoder and Esther Knipe. So, yeah, and remember that we are still, this weekend, you still have time to, I don't know if I put the link, I probably didn't, into this video, but if you go on to Ribbon Candy Hooking, the book that we're looking at during the week on Coffee Time by Tamara Pavich, Designed by You, is our giveaway book that I'll be giving away on Monday, February 7th at Coffee Time, 10 a.m. So you still have time to go to that video and enter a comment. Where do you like to vacation? What's your favorite vacation place? And that will automatically enter you in the drawing to possibly win that book. There'll be 3 winners on Monday. So that book we're still thinking about and talking about, but this was our book for tonight. This was the Close to the Heart book for tonight. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. I enjoyed it just immensely. Really, yeah, super inspiring. I mean, it's you know, I was thinking the other day, you know, as a hooker, as a rug maker in general, right? I like all kinds of mediums. I'm into all kinds of crazy stuff. You think, like, you hate to divide your life up into time and seasons or whatever, and you think, how many things can I make? How many things can I make between, it's like so awful, but between now and death? And you want it to be infinite because you have so many ideas, right? And then I look at the work that she did here. I mean, and I think that's what you do, right? she did work by Matisse, work by Cezanne, stuff that was like Mondrian, Picasso, and then she did traditional stuff from the Coppa. You do what you feel like at that minute, and that's the best that you can do. And you do as much of that for as long as you can. And that's the best you can do, right? Because I keep thinking, well, sooner or later I have to do this kind of a piece, or sooner or later I have to experiment with a really fine cut, or and then I think, no, the thing to do is to just do, you're going to enjoy the most the thing that your heart feels like doing at that moment. And you're going to find it comes easier, and you're going to work faster and with more joy if you're working on something that you love. So you just do like Esther did in her life, sometimes very traditional pieces, sometimes prayer rugs, sometimes Brock, sometimes Picasso. You just do what you feel like when you feel like it. And that takes you through the years, through the months, through the days, through the seasons, the good ones, the bad ones. It takes you right through. And that is the soundtrack to your life, right? All of those pictures, that is the story of your life. And I think that's the way you do it. I don't have a better idea than that. And I'm really inspired by all of her rugs. So I hope you enjoyed the episode too. You are so welcome. Hey, I am off antiquing tomorrow. If I see rugs in those shops, I'm headed up toward Brimfield, Massachusetts. They have the big fair, but that's not this time of year. And Palmer, Mass, to some of the stores up there. There's a nice old pub up there where I know we'll stop and have a little cocktail. But it'd just be nice to be with my sister. I'm looking forward to just having time, just the two of us, and tooting around. She looks for different things too, thank God. We're not going to be fighting over rugs or anything like that. But if I see anything absolutely wonderful, I'll send a picture from the store so you have the chance to call or something if you go, oh my God, I've been looking for that, or I need that, or I can't live without that. If I haven't gotten it, which I probably won't, I'm just not in a great money thing right now with spending. I'll post stuff as I go tomorrow, as I see stuff, so you have the chance to call stores and say, hey, listen, can you ship? Because that happens a lot when I go shopping. People end up calling and getting the rugs shipped, and why not? You can shop, what's the word, vicariously through me. Why not? And let me shop through you too. So anyway, thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have the day off. It's definitely time. So have a great weekend, everybody, and I will see you on Monday. Thanks, Linda. It was a fun episode for me, too. I will see you on Monday. Remember to enter the contest sponsored by Raw Cooking Magazine for Tamara Pavich's book, and I will be back to you with some great content and our next book giveaway on Monday morning at coffee time. Have a great weekend.